Little black boy told the judge, "I'm my mom's lawyer." Then something unbelievable happened. The courthouse smelled like old paper, polished wood, and the quiet tension of lives hanging in the balance. It was the kind of place where voices didn't rise, where even footsteps felt hesitant, like they were intruding on something sacred, or dangerous, or both. And yet, there he stood, barely over 4 feet tall, wearing a too-big navy blazer with sleeves that almost swallowed his hands, a red clip-on tie slightly crooked against his starched white shirt, and eyes that held more conviction than most men twice his age. 12-year-old Micah Lattimore didn't flinch as the judge looked down at him from the elevated bench, brow arched, gavel resting silently like a threat that hadn't yet been spoken. "Excuse me," the judge said, leaning forward just slightly. "Can you repeat that?" Micah's voice didn't waver. "I said, I'm my mom's lawyer today." There was a beat of silence so sharp it cut through the murmurs in the gallery. People shifted. A few gasped. Someone in the back, maybe one of the journalists, let out a quiet, "You've got to be kidding me." But Micah didn't even blink. His hands gripped the sides of the small podium where witnesses typically stood, his chin high, his back straight like he had practiced in the mirror 1,000 times. The judge looked toward the court clerk, then to the bailiff, then back down at the child. "Son, I don't think you understand how this works." "I read the rules," Micah replied, his voice firm. "She doesn't have a lawyer. She can't afford one. You said in the last hearing that she could represent herself. So if she can do that, then she can choose me to speak for her." The judge's mouth opened, then closed. It wasn't just what the boy was saying, it was how he said it. No hesitation, no fear, and not in some childish make-believe way, but with the measured precision of someone who had actually done the work. Micah's mother, Tamara Lattimore, sat just behind him at the defendant's table, one hand over her mouth, the other holding tightly to a worn manila folder filled with court documents, printed articles, eviction notices, medical bills, and a drawing Micah had made for her 3 years ago when she was sick. "You are stronger than anything," written in big, shaky letters. She looked tired, not just the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but soul-tired. The kind of fatigue that came from years of fighting systems that never seemed to see her as more than a line on a file or a check in a box. But at that moment, her eyes held something else, pride, and the kind of stunned hope that made her want to cry and laugh at the same time. The courtroom wasn't empty. A few reporters had shown up after whispers about the case had trickled into local media. Another single mom facing housing court, another story about missed payments and predatory loans, and a landlord who wanted to revitalize the building. It wasn't rare. What was rare was Micah. The judge leaned back slowly. "Mr. Lattimore, do you understand what your mother is facing here today?" "Yes, Your Honor," Micah answered. "This isn't just about rent. It's about a lease that was changed without her consent. It's about repairs that weren't made. And it's about her being pushed out because the new owner wants to tear down the place and turn it into condos." The judge rubbed his temples. "This is highly irregular." "But not illegal," Micah said. "I have case references. I brought notes. And if you'll let me speak, I can explain why what's happening to her isn't fair or lawful." The judge paused again. His nameplate read Judge R. Estabrook, a man known in the city for his no-nonsense approach, but also, occasionally, for moments of surprising humanity. "I'll allow a brief statement," the judge said carefully. "But be aware, this is still an official hearing. If you misrepresent facts or speak out of turn, there will be consequences." Micah nodded once, like a young soldier stepping into battle. "I understand." 3 weeks earlier, everything had been different. It was a Tuesday when the notice came, taped to the door of apartment 3B in red and black ink. the kind that didn't ask questions or offer apologies. Tamara had stared at it with her keys still in her hand, as if willing the paper to disappear. But it didn't. It said she had 30 days to vacate, that back payments had invalidated her lease, that redevelopment plans required the immediate removal of tenants not in full standing. Micah read it over her shoulder. Can they do that? Tamara didn't answer. She just took a breath and pushed open the door. Their apartment wasn't fancy, but it was home. The couch had 2 mismatched pillows, and the kitchen window overlooked the city's train line. The bookshelf was full of library books, most of them about science and space and law, Micah's passions. And taped to the fridge was a photo of Micah at age 8, standing proudly next to his science fair volcano. In the corner, his mom had written, "My future genius." Tamara worked 2 jobs, one at a local grocery chain, another at a senior care center. Every month was a negotiation with math. Rent versus groceries, asthma medication versus school shoes. She had never missed a payment intentionally. Sometimes things were late, but she always made them. Always. So when the notice came, something inside her cracked. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough for her to sit at the kitchen table that night, head in her hands, whispering, "I don't know what else they want from me." Micah sat across from her. "I'll help." She looked up, red-eyed. "Baby, this isn't something a 12-year-old can fix." Micah didn't argue. He just went to his room and opened his laptop. He started with eviction law, then housing codes, then something called constructive eviction, which meant that if a landlord didn't provide basic repairs, tenants might have grounds to fight back. He read for hours each night after homework. He watched YouTube videos of real court cases. He scribbled notes in the margins of his school notebooks. 3 days later, he told his mom, "You don't need a lawyer. You've got me." She laughed at first. Then she saw the binder. "Micah, where did you?" "I downloaded court records. It's public. You just have to know where to look." Tamara stared at her son like she'd never seen him before. "Please let me try," he said softly. "Just let me speak. Once." She didn't say yes right away, but she didn't say no. And that was enough. Now, in the courtroom, Micah stood with his binder open and his voice steady. "My mom reported mold in the apartment 5 times in the last year. There are emails. She was told someone would come fix it. They never did. She's got medical documents showing her asthma got worse because of it. And yet they're saying she broke her lease." The judge nodded slowly, skimming the papers Micah had handed over. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't dismissing him either. Micah kept going. "I found another case in the same county where a judge ruled that failure to repair mold was a breach of habitability. The tenant got to stay. Why should this be different?" Silence. Real silence. Judge Estabrook looked down at Micah like he was trying to understand something much bigger than one child's argument. Then he said something no one in the courtroom expected. "Mr. Lattimore, please approach the bench." Micah's sneakers made the softest scuffing sounds as he approached the bench, binder clutched in both hands, like he was stepping onto sacred ground. The room was so quiet you could hear the rustle of someone adjusting their tie 2 rows back. Judge Estabrook leaned forward, both elbows resting on the broad wooden desk, his face unreadable but focused. "You said you researched this case?" the judge asked, voice lower now, almost private, though still loud enough to carry. "By yourself?" Micah nodded. "Yes, sir. My mom helped me find some of the papers, but I did most of the reading." "Do you understand the consequences if you misrepresent information in court?" Micah swallowed. "Yes, I do." The judge turned the printed email copies Micah had submitted. his fingers pausing on the highlighted mold complaints dated back over a year. He raised an eyebrow, then glanced toward the plaintiff's table where Mr. Carson Duvall, the building's new landlord and CEO of a real estate development firm, sat adjusting his cufflinks impatiently. "Mr. Duvall," the judge said with a mild tone, "do you or your counsel have a response to these documents?" Duvall leaned over and whispered something to his attorney, a lean man in an expensive gray suit who stood and replied smoothly, "Your Honor, we're not disputing the condition of the property per se, only that Ms. Lattimore failed to meet the rent schedule outlined in her revised lease." Revised without her signature, Micah cut in softly but clearly. The attorney blinked, startled. Judge Estabrook didn't correct the interruption. "Do you have proof of that, Mr. Lattimore?" he asked. Micah opened the binder, flipped to a section tabbed in blue, and handed over a printout. A scanned lease agreement with no second signature line filled in. She never signed the amendment. It was mailed to her, but she never agreed. I also checked with the Renters' Rights Alliance, and they said if a lease is changed without a tenant's consent and without their actual signature, it's not enforceable. The judge studied the paper for a moment, then let out the faintest exhale. "How old are you, son?" "12. "And what do you want out of this case?" Micah looked back at his mom, who was sitting still, lips pressed together, eyes glossy. He turned back to the judge. "I want my mom to keep our home. I want people to stop treating her like she's invisible just because she works 2 jobs and doesn't wear fancy clothes. And I want someone to say this is wrong, out loud, in a way that means something. No theatrics, no raised voice, just truth." The judge sat back. "This hearing will continue," he said, addressing the room, "and the court will allow this young man to speak on behalf of his mother under advisement. However, I am also ordering that legal aid be contacted to assign counsel, should they choose to continue representation. But until then, this court is not ignoring what's been presented here." A few people in the courtroom clapped before realizing they shouldn't. The bailiff cleared his throat. Reporters began scribbling furiously. Micah returned to the defense table and handed his mother a folded note. She opened it quietly. It read, "I've got you. I promise." The next few days moved like a blur. Micah was still going to school, still trying to stay focused on his math homework and history quiz on the Reconstruction era. But his mind was consumed with case law, court dates, and finding the next piece of evidence that could keep their home from becoming rubble beneath another glass condo. Tamara had sat him down the night after the hearing, eyes red, voice trembling. "Micah, I love you, but this is too much for you. You shouldn't be the one fighting this fight." "But who else will?" he asked. "You've been trying for months. No one listens. Not the housing board. Not the building manager. But when I stood up, he listened. I don't want you to grow up thinking you have to fix the world by yourself." "I don't," he said. "Just our part of it." She hugged him hard, the kind of hug that made you forget what time it was, where you were, how long you had until morning. Micah spent every evening reading. He printed photos of the bathroom tiles that had buckled from water damage, the peeling paint in the bedroom where his mom coughed at night, and a maintenance request she had filed that was never logged. He also found 3 other tenants in the building who had been evicted in the last 6 months, each of them low income, each replaced within weeks by short-term renters at triple the price. He interviewed one of them on his mom's old iPhone. The man, Mr. Otis Campbell, wore a grease-stained work shirt and stood in front of a motel room he now rented by the week. "They didn't even wait till my lease was up," he said in the video. "Told me there was construction damage and sent a guy with a clipboard. That clipboard cost me my home." Micah added the video to a slideshow he'd built in PowerPoint. He labeled each slide with big, bold letters like pattern of displacement and unjust lease practices. He watched documentaries, took notes, practiced speaking in front of the mirror. He even emailed a lawyer whose blog he'd read online, Sonia Hayes, a civil rights attorney who'd once sued a landlord for disability discrimination. He didn't expect a response, but one came. Subject: Need advice from a kid. From Sonia Hayes to micalawdefender@gmail.com. Micah, I'm not sure how you found me, but I read everything you sent. I don't normally reply to messages like this, but yours was different. I don't know if I can take your case personally, but I'll be there at your next hearing. You deserve to be heard, and your mom deserves justice. Sonia H. Micah stared at the email like it was a magic spell. She believed him. That meant someone else might too. The next hearing was set for Friday at 10 a.m. The night before, Micah couldn't sleep. His suit jacket was hanging from the closet door. His binder was packed. He'd even practiced what he'd say if the judge gave him one more chance to speak. But that morning, something happened that nearly stopped the whole thing. As they stepped outside, their apartment door slammed behind them, and a notice was taped to the hallway wall. Emergency construction notice, Unit 3B scheduled for a pre-demolition inspection. Tamara stared at it in disbelief. They're trying to force us out, she whispered. They're not even waiting for the ruling. Micah didn't flinch. We're not moving, he said. Not today. He grabbed her hand, and they headed back to court. Courtroom 6B was fuller than usual. Whether it was the murmured chatter from local reporters, or just the magnetism of an unfolding drama unlike anything the city had seen in a while, it seemed like word had gotten out. Not just about Tamara Lattimore's case, but about the boy, the kid who stood before a judge with a binder full of facts and eyes full of fire. Micah sat at the defense table, his blazer still too big but now worn with purpose, a faint scuff on his right dress shoe, and his mother sitting beside him, straighter today, more focused, as if some part of the weight she had been carrying alone was finally being shared. The judge entered and the court rose. Judge Estabrook didn't pause long before motioning for everyone to sit again. But there was something different in his posture. Measured, serious, not annoyed, not rushed. Before we begin, he said, I want to remind everyone that this court exists to serve justice, not spectacle. I understand this case has drawn attention. I will not tolerate disruptions. But I also won't dismiss efforts made in good faith, no matter how unusual the circumstances may be. Micah glanced sideways at his mom, who gave him the smallest nod. She hadn't said much that morning, but her fingers had wrapped around his tightly as they entered the courthouse. Mr. Duval, the plaintiff, leaned back in his seat, expression unreadable behind expensive glasses, while his attorney stood to address the bench. Your Honor, we feel this proceeding has already extended beyond precedent. With all due respect to Mr. Lattimore's initiative, this court must rely on proper legal procedure, not student-led enthusiasm. We ask for a summary judgment in favor of the property owner. The judge raised one hand. Denied, he said simply. There is credible evidence of disputed facts, and I'm not prepared to rule without full consideration. Micah stood slowly. I have more to present, he said. The judge looked at him directly. Go ahead. Micah took a deep breath and opened the binder again, this time flipping to a section tabbed in red. He began clicking through his laptop, then turned it toward the front bench. I compiled a pattern of evictions in the last 9 months. 7 low-income tenants removed from this building, all without legal representation. Each one replaced within 30 days with either short-term renters or new tenants paying nearly double. He clicked again. A chart appeared, simple, clean, color-coded. I also have video testimony from a former tenant, Mr. Otis Campbell, who confirmed he was misled during the process and forced to vacate under false pretenses. The repairs they cited as urgent were never done. I went by the building yesterday. His unit is still vacant, untouched. The judge squinted, examining the screen. Do you have these statements recorded? Yes, Micah replied. I emailed them to the court clerk last night. At that moment, a woman stepped forward from the crowd. She was tall, with natural hair pulled back into a clean bun, wearing a navy suit and carrying a leather case. I'd like to speak, Your Honor. Name? The judge asked. Sonia Hayes, civil rights attorney. I was contacted by Mr. Lattimore. I'm not officially counsel, but I'd like to make a motion for amicus participation and speak to the systemic pattern of forced displacement present in this case. Duvall's lawyer let out a breath, clearly frustrated. Ms. Hayes, the judge said slowly, I will permit your statement briefly. She approached the bench. Her voice was calm but unshakable. Your Honor, this isn't just about one tenant. This is part of a growing trend in urban neighborhoods. Push out long-term residents with technical lease violations, inflate prices, and market new luxury units without honoring old agreements. What this boy has uncovered isn't just impressive. It's the blueprint of a broader injustice. She turned to Micah, just briefly, before continuing. I've represented adults with degrees and full legal teams who haven't done half this work. If that doesn't speak to the urgency and integrity of this situation, I don't know what does. The judge was silent for a long moment. He then looked at Micah. You've brought forth testimony, documents, a timeline, and even precedent. This is beyond impressive. But I still need to hear from your mother. Tamara looked startled. Her lips parted, as if words had been caught in her throat for so long they'd forgotten how to come out. Micah leaned toward her gently. You got this, he whispered. She stood slowly. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. I've worked since I was 17, she began. I've raised my son without help. I pay my bills. I don't take shortcuts. I have asthma and I kept working through flare-ups. I cooked dinner next to leaking pipes and moldy walls. And I still showed up every month with what I could. Sometimes late, but always something. And when I asked for repairs, I got silence. She swallowed. But the moment the building got bought out, I got a notice. Then another. And now they want to pretend this is my fault. Like I'm the problem. But the problem isn't me. It's people like Mr. Duvall deciding what a neighborhood should look like, who belongs, who doesn't. She paused, looked toward Micah. I didn't go to law school, but I raised a boy who reads court briefs like comic books. I didn't ask him to fight this fight, but he stepped up because he saw the truth. And so did I. Silence again. This time, even Duvall looked uncomfortable. The judge adjusted his glasses. This court is prepared to review the evidence in full before issuing a ruling, he said finally. Until that ruling is given, no demolition or construction will take place in apartment 3B. That order is binding. Micah exhaled. Tamara grabbed his hand. Sonia Hayes smiled and gave the boy a quiet nod. For the first time since the eviction notice arrived, there was something different in the room. Not relief exactly, not yet, but a pause in the storm. A breath. They had stopped the machine. At least for now. And Micah wasn't finished yet. The hallway outside Courtroom 6B had never felt more alive. Reporters waited with notepads and lenses, eager to catch a glimpse of the kid lawyer. Court staff lingered near the elevators, whispering. And people, strangers, neighbors, even other tenants Micah had never seen before, nodded at him as if he'd done something historic, as if somehow he'd carried more than his own family's burden into that courtroom. But inside his chest, Micah felt anything but victorious. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. They hadn't won. They'd only paused the wrecking ball. Sonia Hayes walked alongside Tamara and Micah down the corridor, her heels clicking on the tile floor, her tone clipped but warm. "You held your ground today," she said to Micah. "Most law students would have crumbled under that much pressure, and you didn't blink." Micah shrugged, his binder tucked under his arm like a shield. "It's not over. They're still coming after her." "They are," Sonia said, "but they'll have to go through me next time." Tamara gave Sonia a grateful glance. "You don't even know us." "I know injustice when I see it," Sonia said, "and I know bravery when it walks into court with a binder full of fire." They stepped out into the sun, where TV vans were already parked near the courthouse entrance. Micah blinked against the light, suddenly aware of how tired he was, of how much it had taken just to make it through the day. And then came the voice. Micah! Micah Lattimore, a young reporter, barely older than college age, jogged up with a mic and a cameraman trailing behind her. "Can we ask you a few questions? People are calling you the kid who took on the system. What would you say to kids watching you right now?" Micah hesitated. Then he spoke quietly but with clarity. "I'm not special," he said. "I just didn't want to let my mom lose everything because nobody wanted to listen. That's all." The clip aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news, and then again at 10, and then it made its way online. Within 24 hours, the video had over 3 million views. And with it came more than just praise. Tamara got a call the next day from a woman named Carla Jennings, a community organizer who ran a tenants alliance across the city. "I saw your boy on the news," she said, "and we've got a rally next weekend. People need to hear your story. You in?" Tamara hesitated. "I'm not a speaker." Carla laughed. "That's okay. You've already raised one." Meanwhile, Micah's principal pulled him out of fourth period to speak with him in the office. "You're not in trouble, mister," Reyes said quickly when Micah's eyes widened. "Actually, I've got someone on the line who wants to talk to you. Someone from Howard University." "Howard?" Micah asked, unsure whether to feel excited or confused. The principal pressed the speaker button. "You're on." A calm, rich voice filled the room. "Mr. Lattimore, my name is Dr. Reuben Kane. I'm the head of our Early Scholars Initiative. We saw the footage from your court hearing. We're not calling to offer anything official yet, but I'd like to talk to your mother about putting you on our mentoring track. We usually start with high school students, but, well, exceptions can be made." Micah blinked. He hadn't expected this. He didn't even know how to respond. Thank you," he said quietly. That night, Tamara sat on the couch with Micah beside her, scrolling through emails. There were dozens. Offers of help, messages of support, even lawyers offering pro bono services. But one email stood out. It was from someone claiming to be a former employee of Duval Properties. Subject line, "Proof you'll want." The message read, "I used to work in the leasing department. They've been changing lease terms illegally for months. I have internal documents. If you're serious about stopping them, I want to help." Attached were 2 files. One was a spreadsheet of unit addresses, including 3B, with notes in a column labeled Priority for Relocation High ROI. The other was a draft memo from Duval's legal team suggesting edits to a strategy document titled Tenant Turnover Maximization. Tamara scrolled through it, her eyes narrowing. Micah leaned over, reading quickly. "They were planning this all along," he said, "even before they bought the building." Can we use this? Tamara looked up at him. With Sonia's help? Yes. At the next court date, the atmosphere was different. Colder. More prepared. Duval now had 3 lawyers, not one. Their posture was aggressive. Their tone almost smug. But Sonia stood tall at the defense table, her statement calm and clear. Your Honor, we now have evidence of a systemic plan by the plaintiff's company to remove long-standing tenants by altering leases without consent, targeting low-income residents under the guise of renovation. She handed over the documents. These were submitted anonymously by a former employee, and we have verified their authenticity. They show intent, not coincidence. The judge skimmed through them, frowned, turned slowly to the plaintiff's table. Would you care to respond, Mr. Duval? His lawyer stood. These documents are stolen. They should be inadmissible. Not if they expose wrongdoing, the judge said evenly. The court will accept them for review. A tremor passed through the gallery. Duval's composure cracked for just a second. And Micah, sitting quietly, could feel it. The tide was turning. Later, in the hallway again, Sonia turned to them. This isn't just your case anymore, she said. We're going to file a civil complaint. And if the judge rules in our favor, your testimony will become precedent. Precedent? Micah asked. It means, Sonia said with a smile, you might be changing how landlords operate across this entire city. Tamara looked at her son. Her eyes filled. You did this, she whispered. Micah didn't answer, but his fingers gripped hers tightly. The final hearing had a strange calmness, as if the tension of weeks and months was gathering, ready to burst or dissolve into something new. The courtroom, still packed with reporters, neighbors, and curious onlookers, felt like the stage of a battle not just about one family's survival but about justice itself. Micah sat next to his mother, their hands intertwined under the table, sharing quiet strength. Judge Estabrook cleared his throat and peered down at the stacks of evidence on his desk. The emails, lease agreements, internal memos, and testimonies compiled painstakingly by a boy who refused to be overlooked. This court finds, he began slowly, that the plaintiff, Mr. Carson Duval, and his company engaged in a pattern of unjust lease practices intended to displace low-income tenants, including Ms. Tamara Lattimore, without proper legal cause or notice. A murmur swept through the room. Tamara's eyes welled up, and Micah's chest swelled with pride. The eviction notice against Ms. Lattimore is hereby invalidated. Furthermore, the defendant is ordered to comply with housing codes and repair obligations immediately. He looked directly at Micah. And young Mr. Lattimore, your advocacy in this matter has been nothing short of remarkable. You have my respect and that of this court. The judge's gavel came down with a decisive sound, echoing like a victory cry. Outside the courthouse, people cheered. Reporters clamored for interviews, and neighbors hugged Tamara and Micah. The rally Carla Jennings organized swelled with hundreds, celebrating the triumph of courage and justice. But more than the victory, it was what came next that cemented their story. The city council invited Tamara and Micah to speak at a public hearing on tenant rights reform. Sonia Hayes worked with local lawmakers to draft new tenant protection laws inspired by their case. Micah, once a quiet boy with a passion for science and justice, became a symbol, not just of fighting back but of hope, resilience, and the power one voice can have when it refuses to be silenced. As Tamara held Micah close that night, she whispered, "You were my lawyer, my hero, and the world's." And Micah smiled, knowing this was only the beginning.